My brain just had a complete click and shut down. But we're back now, and this is going to be a video. I'm Mario Di Leone, Voices of Victory podcast. And we're going to discuss the flow of life through a Vedic lens. If you're not familiar with the Vedic culture, the culture of India, the culture of the Vedas, which is a wonderful, beautiful, spiritual treatise that goes back over 5,000 years. So we're going to talk about the flow of life, and the very first key point I want to bring to the table right now is ritual, the concept of ritual. What I want to share with you in a modern psychology framework, and then I'll move back to the Vedic framework, is very simple, is that our behaviors are patterns and our thoughts are patterns. So we have thought loops. So we as human beings are patterns. Our behavior is patterns, our thinking is patterns, and our emotions is patterns. Done. And the more you learn to disrupt these patterns, the more you will step into an area of change where beautiful things will start occurring in your life as a result. So in terms of the first concept today, we're going to talk about ritual. Rituals. So we have internal rituals and we have external rituals. The internal ritual could be the self-talk, those patterns we discussed, the thought loops, the emotional repetition that keeps going on and on and on over and over again. Now, why is ritual even important? Well, things that you do are connected to your identity, and your identity becomes repeated and rehearsed until it becomes very solid. So you can see that if we are the patterns, if we are the behaviors, if we are the emotional thought loops, if we are all those things, then what you repeat is attached to your identity. That's what's important. So you can see this very clearly when people have a negative experience and they make it a point, they make it a very specific point to tell everyone. And every time, this is where they're not realizing that lack of self-awareness is there. This is where every time they tell the story, they're attaching that negative story to their identity, and you're making that narrative, that story, that experience is being attached to your identity more and more and more and more. And you just, the more you tell it, the more you repeat it, the more you repeat it, the more it's attached to your identity, the more it's attached to who you are. And again, this is not to say that your story isn't important, but what we need to understand is we have to transcend our narratives. That's what's important, is that you are not your story. Okay? You've experienced it. And it's up to you to transcend that. It should be used as a means and vehicle for healing, not necessarily becoming a label. When you take a story and you make it a label, something that's fixed, you can wind up making it very permanent for yourself. In other words, it becomes like a permanent fixture, right? When you own your story, it's coming into the idea that it's a vehicle for healing. It's going to help you with the process, basically. But I first learned this when I was speaking to somebody, and they wanted to be a business owner, and having a business background, we both decided to have a discussion. And I asked them the question, like, hey, what's stopping you from being a business owner? And they're like, I don't know. I'm just a parent, and that's all I'll ever be. So then a few minutes later, I said, well, maybe you can try kind of this angle and that angle. So, because they expressed that they still have a desire. I was like, I still have a desire. I still want to do it, But I don't know. I'm a parent, and that's all I'll ever be. And you'll know when someone is stuck in their narrative when they keep repeating the same words and phrases verbatim over and over again. Now, in terms of Vedic culture and Vedic philosophy, you would basically call those little stories that you keep repeating karmas. Like that person is connected to their karmas so much that they're having difficulty. Okay. Now, the issue with karma is that it takes an extremely long time to explain. Most people get angry, most people get frustrated because the understanding of karma is so vast. And the term has a very bad connotation in modern times. It has a very bad connotation. A lot of people misunderstand it and don't really understand the bigger picture. When a person is constantly repeating that narrative, they're stuck in their karmas. They're literally stuck in that because it's about transcending your story. It's about realizing that you are not your story. You've attached it to your identity. You've adopted it. You've taken ownership of it. It's about transcending it and using it as a vehicle for healing to move you forward, not using it as a label to keep you stuck and keep you staying where you are. And that's the thing. We've had some really shitty, difficult experiences in our life. And the more you fall into that story of this is it, this is all it's ever going to be, the more you stay stuck in that, then what's happening is you are setting yourself up for the inability to move past it. Like the more you reinforce something into your identity so much, the more difficult it is to transcend and work through it. This is not about emotionally bypassing. Like understand something, you're going to have a story and you're going to have a narrative and you're going to have a whole host of shitty emotions behind it. I get it. Like I understand. It's not about bypassing your emotions. Feel your feelings. Feel your feelings. But understand that once you're feeling your feelings, you have to process that emotion and then you have to be able to pivot. How do you process that emotion? Getting right down into journaling. When you journal, that allows the emotional mind, in the Vedic culture we call that manas, and of course our intellectual mind. The emotional and intellectual mind, they start to speak to each other and they start to reconcile. You start to have reconciliation. It's like getting your heart and your head on the same page to shake hands together in alignment. And that's where healing actually begins. Like that's where straight up healing actually begins. So yes, journaling can be incredibly powerful. The hard part is people don't really know what kind of questions to actually ask. I could always help you. If you always want to do that, comment below. We can do it over Discord, whatever the case may be. So when it comes to the rituals, there's the internal and external, right? We've talked about the internal, is that we are patterns. When it comes to the external, it's the things we do. So the things we do are connected to our identity, and the things we repeat in our head are connected to our identity. That also includes story and narratives. That includes all kinds of things. And again, these narratives may be connected to memories and traumas. And that's where it gets really, really deep. That becomes a rope yet to be very untangled. And what I'm saying is it can be untangled, but it requires more work, much more work. Okay? So yes, if you're a person that experienced traumas, actual traumas, it can be difficult because in order to untangle that, you've got to face it. In order to unravel that big knot, you have to be able to face that. You have to be able to face that. So every time you attach that to your identity. When you say, I am pissed off, that word pissed off is going to go into your identity at that moment, and it's going to exacerbate, it's going to make you more angry. The more you say it, the more the anger increases. Yeah. when I say I'm experiencing anger or I see myself having anger, you learn to detach a little bit. What that simply means is you become a witness or an observer. So in the Vedic philosophy, you become the witness of that. Yeah, it's basically like instead of being in the soccer game, you're on the sidelines watching. And that's just based off of how we actually use language, how we use our words. So, like in psychology, for example, they may have you talk about a problem in, let's say, first person. You know, you may talk about a problem and you use your first name. If your first name's Bill, you might say, yeah, you know, Bill had a really bad day yesterday. And what that can actually do is it does the same thing that the Vedic system does, is that you become the witness of that. You're witnessing it. You're not in the soccer game. You're on the sidelines watching. So the moment you use your first name to tell the story, you start to detach from that story. And by doing so, once you detach from that story, you can start to pick apart, right? Because stories can trap us. And like Gabor Mate said, is that a story can, become a trap. And the best way to get out of the trap is not to try to force your way out. It's to actually to pick apart, find its weaknesses, and deconstruct that. And a way to do that would actually to be using your first name in journaling as you tell a different story. And really do your best to understand the story. Like you're going to have experiences in your childhood that are probably really rough. And I get it. Like I understand. I have total compassion for you. So when it comes to the rituals, you have the internal and you have the external. The external things, we have to consider habit formation, the way we form actual habits. When our internal mind has an impact on the external, we have to consider what thoughts we put in our head. Okay. The information we're taking in on a daily basis is going to move us in that direction of action, like to actually take action. So when it comes to a ritual, whatever you repeat gets roped and hooked into your identity. You get connected to who you are, right? So, because like I said, the identity becomes repetitious and rehearsed, And when it comes to the external things, you have to take a good look at those rituals that you're going to do every day. So for example, like brushing teeth, that can be such a simple ritual, but it's part of self-care. But there are people that actually struggle with self-care. You see, they struggle with just doing that. They may struggle with exercise. And what I want to share with you is that we talked about in the beginning is that behavior is patterns, thinking is patterns, emotions is patterns. So when you interrupt or disrupt the behavior, you get to shift it in a new direction. When you interrupt and shift the thinking, you get to move in a different direction of thought. When you get to interrupt and disrupt your emotions, you can actually move in a different direction. Now, that doesn't mean emotionally bypassing. You should still feel your feelings, you should process your feelings, and you should pivot. It's feel them, process them, pivot. Got it? Good. Very important. So let's get away from the external rituals now. Just understand that if you have behaviors that are you're trying to form a new habit, understand that if you try to do too much, too fast, too hard, too soon, if you try to do too much exercise, too soon, too quick, you might backslide. You might drop that habit in a week. Some people could do it. Some people are like the just do it Nike crowd. If you're one of those people, good for you. You're the exception. You're not the rule. If you're that person that struggles with forming a habit of any kind or forming self-discipline of any kind, then this is going to be for you. When you are trying to create that external ritual, understand that it's not the big actions, the big changes, it's the micro actions, it's the small things. It's several tiny, minuscule actions, micro actions that you take each day. So if you normally don't even get any water, you should try at least half a glass. Start with half a glass. Start small. People start too big, they backslide quickly. Because why? Emotional resistance, the manas, the emotional mind in Vedic culture, the manas, the subconscious mind, will start to really pull you back. Oh, you can't do that. Why are you trying to do that? Your brain will self-argue. You have about 5 minutes till your brain goes into self-argument and self-conflict. 5 seconds when you start doing a ritual of any kind, right? So when you're actually want to break that resistance, the best way to break that resistance is literally start very small, tiny, several tiny micro actions with consistency. Very tiny ones. Okay? Very tiny, not huge. Start small. Okay, so that's enough for the whole rituals, internal, external. I think we covered that. The next thing we want to talk about is timing. Timing. Timing is important. We have to start honor our timing. We also have to honor our body in that way too, in terms of health, right? For example, if you work out like really hard, honoring your body means listening to it and say, you know what, I have an injury. I'm going to go a little bit easier today. Okay, the body is incredibly resilient, and the body will indeed heal. There's some people that look at workouts as a form of self-punishment, like, oh, you have to punish yourself, and some people will look at it that way, right? They'll have that frame of mind, that reference. And what I'm trying to say is that you have to listen to your body and allow it time to heal. Okay, if you hurt your shoulder, you damage your shoulder, you have to have that ability to recognize that if you push further, you could really do long-term damage, right? Or if you work out so badly and you hurt yourself so badly that, and it could be just doing the exercise incorrectly. It's good to have proper form when you're working out, when you're doing things. But when you recognize that, hey, if I push 5 times harder right now, I could be recovering for 6 weeks. So it becomes counterproductive because you lose 6 weeks. It could force you to backslide on that habit. In other words, you wind up backsliding on that habit. You go backwards. You want, oh, you know what? I'm not going to do this workout thing. I already hurt myself. It's because we get overzealous. We want too much, too fast, too hard, too soon, right? I'm a big believer in doing intense workouts. Like, I get it. We don't have to take it to the extreme so much where we start to say, okay, I don't care. I have an injury. I don't care. Let me punish myself. No. Part of your self-care is stepping into that compassion, having that compassion for yourself. Not even compassion, having sensory acuity, recognizing if you're close to the goal or far away from the goal. That if you push too hard right now, it can set you back even further, right? That's sensory acuity, to sense, am I getting closer or further away from my goal? Recognize that, but it's also a matter of self-care to know that, hey, this has to heal properly. And as a result of healing properly, if I heal it properly, if I give it the time that it deserves, if I ease up a little bit, I can do more a week from now. 1 week from now, when it is healed, I'll be able to do even more, right? Without the risk of maybe an injury. I mean, there's always going to be that risk, but smart exercise is about mitigating that risk. That's important. So when it comes to timing and honoring, we have to honor the body. We have to be able to have that sensory acuity. Are we closer or further away from the goal? Recognize that. Honoring the time is important too, but we don't do that as modern day people. Honoring the time is like when you get up in the morning, having sleep patterns that are healthy, waking up at sunrise, right? When sunrise gets up, you have the entire day to yourself, right? We become so hooked into comfort that's like, no, I don't want to get out of bed. I'm comfortable, right? But that comfort in bed really doesn't do the world any good. It does you good. If you need the rest and you haven't rested the night before, then obviously you can make that exception. Like, I get it. Like, I understand. Where there is a balance of things is that timings like, sunset, right? Sunrise, the afternoon, the full day, and then sunset, and then finally getting to bed. There's a whole timing for that. We go through an entire time. We have cycles that we go through. Circadian rhythms is one of them. So you go through the cycles and rhythms of life, of time. And nothing is permanent. Like I try to tell people, like when it comes to understanding time, nothing is permanent. Not the house, not the car, not our lives, nothing. COVID-19, if it proved anything, it proved that there's nothing that's permanent. People were dropping like flies. The job that they were in for 30 years, suddenly they were just like, you know what, I'm done. I'm finished. People hit their threshold. And that was just COVID is not another discussion. It's just to get people to understand that human beings were pushed to the edge of their threshold. That wasn't a feature. That was literally like an experience of it, right? Is that we went beyond our thresholds for the first time. And as a result, it's changed the dynamics. People realized the importance of sleep because of how sleep impacted the immune, right? And if they didn't, their anxious thoughts in the middle of the night kept them up at night. And then even that could wind up reducing their immune system as a result because of the fact that they can't get their mind under control. They couldn't get their sleep under control. And if you can't get your sleep under control, then your immune system was having an issue. And these are the patterns. These are basically the timing and rhythm of things. This is how the human mind works with its fluctuations that it carries, right? So when it comes to timing, you can even deal with timing with people. There's a timing in terms of asking your boss for a raise. Some people will just, I want to be spontaneous. I want to be impulsive. Just do it, right? It may not always be the right moment. You could be catching them off guard, right? Some people are spontaneous. There's a difference between spontaneity and impulse. There's a big difference between spontaneity and impulse. Certain impulses could actually destroy your life and be very damaging. When we live according to our impulses too much and we don't learn to govern them and work on them, then they control you. You become a puppet to your own impulses, okay? Which is not fun at all. It's not fun. So with timing, there's timing with conversation. Is it the right time to speak to somebody, right? Is it the right time? There's timing with, dealing with the sunset. There's timing at night when it gets dark. It's like the body starts to shut down. It's important to have that ritual to get yourself to shut your body down for the night. So having that ice cold shower before bed, when that ice cold water hits your brain stem, right, hits the amygdala, in about 20 minutes, your body will slowly shut down. And there is a distinction between, let's say, going to sleep and actually staying asleep. They are different. So the timing is not just conversational. It's also identifying how things are going in that day, right? I like to have lunch at 12 noon and a big one, and that's it. I'm done for the day. One meal a day, also known as OMAD. I do it usually 12 noon, and I'm finished. And the rest of the day is done. And I digest that way. So with timing, you honor the time, you honor the body. And also interpersonally, you could kind of honor situations more efficiently with that. Some people are constantly trying to wait for the right time, where that could always be a problem because like you're waiting. It's not always about waiting for the right time. It's creating the conditions that create ripeness for it. So if you have to talk to your boss about it, send them an email, send them a text and say, I need to speak to you on Thursday at 4 o'clock, or what's a good time for you because this needs to be discussed. You see what I'm saying? So it's not about waiting to have that conversation. It's about creating the conditions through action that are going to move you in that direction. That's what that's about. Let's talk about the last one. So we talked about ritual. We talked about timing. The last one is literally intention. 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 So I've talked about this a couple days ago. I'm going to talk about it again. If we look at a knife, right? A knife could be used to cut your food. Could, if it's a scalpel, it can perform surgery and heal people, and it could actually murder somebody. And a pen, using a pen as a tool, this can be used to write kind things, can be used to write destructive things, and can be used to create agreements and sign contracts, right? So what's to be understood is the intention gives context and clarity to your actions. You have the free will. Fate and free will are two sides of the same coin. There is fate because there is free will, right? And I always say fate is what happens to you, but destiny is actually what you do with it. Okay? It's like these are the cards you're dealt, and you got to play them to the best of your ability. The big question is how and when and why and how, right? So you'll be able to do that. So intention gives context, and it gives context and clarity to actions. So that knife, if it's used with the intent to heal somebody, awesome. And the transformational, or the way to transcend, is that if you have a person that's using something for a negative intention and they suddenly transform that over to healing or another direction. So I'm going to give you an example. So there's a photographer that I've known through a friend of a friend, a photographer. He was a war soldier and a sniper, Rhodesian army in Africa, okay? And he was a sniper. So this guy was used to looking down the barrel and watching people's heads explode when he pulled the trigger and drive a bullet. He pretty much had his rifle, a knife, and some rations, like going over enemy territory, enemy lines. And day by day, hour after hour, he was looking down the barrel, looking through the scope, pulling the trigger, and watches people's heads blow up. You do that for a long enough time, pretty much what starts happening is you wind up starting to have PTSD. You wind up having PTSD, which eventually he had PTSD. Well, essentially he came back home, wartime's over, and it's time for him to change the dynamic. You're now becoming a civilian. You're no longer a soldier. Although so many people wrap that harshly into their identity that once they try to detach from that, they say once a soldier, always a soldier, and they fight to the end of the earth to defend that principle, to defend that concept. And that's fine. If you're a soldier and that's your duty and responsibility, by all means, I won't stop you. Defend it all you want. Not a problem. I understand. I honor what you've been through. But here's the kicker. He came back. He decided to integrate himself into the world. He had this PTSD. And he just couldn't sleep at night. Problems, obviously you get a bunch of fragmented memories in the brain, and what happens is you get PTSD and your brain can't unpack. Well, it has difficulty unpacking the experience and repacking the whole experience back into the brain to where it's healthy. Okay? It's kind of like processing all of those visuals and all those experiences in a healthy way. We weren't really taught how to do that. So he went to a psychologist, and the psychologist was like, all right, well, what can I do? He's like, I have PTSD. He's like, I have this urge to constantly look down a barrel, to look down the scope constantly. And it's like, that's all I want to do. And I just have pictures at night of that. So the psychologist says, take up photography. So he gave him a little money. He said, go buy a camera. He went out and he bought like a telephoto lens camera, long lens. So instead of killing people, this is how the intention was transformed. Instead of killing people and looking down the scope and blowing somebody's head up, he was looking down the scope of a camera and capturing a life. It was no longer about death. The metaphor was transcended. So healing happened. So this is what I mean. Don't get it twisted what I'm about to say. This is the most important part of the entire presentation. Intention gives context and clarity to actions. The intention went from killing to capturing the life. So much so that he became an award-winning photographer. And I'm not mentioning their name for the sake of privacy and security of that person, because now they're passed away. That's how it's going to go. So the intention was transformed and healing happened. The same thing would have happened for someone who actually was maybe a killer with a knife versus someone who uses a scalpel and heals. It would have been no different. The only difference would have been maybe really difficult to get a job after you hurt somebody in that way, right? So, you know, the transcendence would be different, but you get my overall arching point. Intention gives context and clarity to actions. And that is where the true healing actually begins. When we start to recognize our intent, our intention. Why are we doing this? What's the intention behind the workout? What's your intention behind that conversation? So you have that. To wrap it up, ritual, internal, external. The internal, external. Timing, honoring the body, honoring the rhythms of life. That's what this is all about. Intention, it gives context and clarity to action. And that's all I'm going to say. If you like this video, do me a favor, comment below, like, subscribe, and buy me a coffee. There's a little link in the description. Buy me a coffee because I love coffee. Have a great day, and I shall see you on the next episode.